Pleasure to introduce our senior minister, Dr. Reverend Raymont Anderson.
Good morning to you.
Good
morning. Good morning to you. Good morning, dear family.
And all is well.
So how's it going today?
Great.
Sadness.
Did you want it to be louder or?
Well, it's just, there's this thing, which I'm sure Safi can attest to, there's this thing about putting sound into a room. And I don't think I heard everybody to a degree that I actually believe that you feel great today. In the midst of the sadness, that is. Because that's conditional. I'm talking about from your unconditional self.
Go ahead now.
So, last week, actually, no, I'm not going to start that way. I'm going to ask you, what did we talk about last week? Give me one key. Sorry.
Wait for the book.
Give me one key thing that stood out for you from last week that we talked about.
Foundation.
Foundation of what?
Principle.
Foundation of principle. Cool.
And we believe.
Spiritual practice.
And we believe, spiritual practice. Anything else? Good, Lisa.
Where am I at war with myself?
Where am I at war with myself? Okay.
We are light beings, we emit light.
We are light beings and we emit light. Thank you, AARP. So, that's the beginning, right? This understanding of the foundation that we're building upon. And today we're going a little bit deeper or further or, more into the construction site by talking about this thing called thought. Because if you remember, we talked about three specific things. We talked about the thing itself, we talked about consciousness, the power. And so our thoughts, that's the power. How are we using this power of creative thought to craft this life experience? Because we have an option to do it unconsciously and just keep on doing it unconsciously. Or we have an option of becoming more conscious of it so that it's more directed. It's coming from a place of more awakenedness, being, versus just, yeah, I'm good. It's all God. Yay, team. But nothing in your life is changing. Nothing in the world is changing. So if we're actually going to get to the nitty-gritty of this, then we should see evidence of it, right?
Yes.
I mean, if someone, raise your hand if you cook and or bake something. Whether it's from an actual recipe or recipe in your mind and heart, right? Here's the recipe. If you just have the recipe and never do anything with it, what's the point in having the recipe, correct? So ultimately, it's what am I doing with it? I have to produce something with it. Now, that doesn't mean, that it has to be, because you get to tweak and change recipes. But it means somewhere, some shape or form, there is a product that you're creating that is then being served to someone else. It's how you show up. If you're an artist, there's a product, whether it's a musical or vocal product, or a painting, drawing, sculpture, photograph, something. If you're a teacher, then your product is how you are imparting knowledge to the students. How many of us are really taking this teaching and doing that with it? So today we're talking about, as you think in your heart, anybody know where that's from? We'll get to it in a minute. As you think in your heart, specifically, because a lot of people leave off, people say, as you think, so shall ye be. But they leave off, as you think in your heart, so shall you be.
That's what the Bible.
They leave off the in your heart part, but we're good today. We say things like, thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. Change your thinking, change your life. As you think, so shall you be. And I have to do the pose. However, we are invited as we get back to basics to go deeper and really explore what these phrases and the underlying concepts mean and can look like when we apply them from a deeper level of mental stewardship. Specifically, mental stewardship. As we talk about being good stewards of the center and stuff. We talk about being good stewards of our property and our money and our homes. We talk about being good stewards of that. But we rarely talk about being good stewards of, effective stewards of our consciousness and our minds. More people know more about, to the actual penny, what's in their checking and savings. Some don't, but we're not talking about them today. More people, what's in their bank account to the actual decimal point than they are aware of the thoughts held in their mind. So we're going to dive a little deep today, and if I do my job well, I will have stepped on at least 3 toes and pushed at least 4 buttons. Okay, so how we can take this understanding of God, keeping in mind that's what we're talking about, God, and make it applicable and alive in our own lives. So if there's only one mind, and that mind is God's mind, and that mind is ever expansive, etc., 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 and that mind is
My mind now.
So we're always talking about, in some way, shape, or form, how we are experiencing and expressing this thing called God. Spirit, source, the universe. Everything, ultimately. Doesn't matter if Lisa and I get into a conversation about chocolate chip cookies. Ultimately, on some level, the spiritual basis of it is, how are we talking about God expressing itself as chocolate chip cookies? Safi and I are discussing music. Ultimately, beneath, we're talking about the vibration of God expressing itself as music. Every conversation, every interaction, everything we do is God doing it. But we don't live like that. Because it's easier to separate and think, oh, well, there's Jane and there's Ray. There's Jim and there's Ray. There's separation, different people. It's funny that, and I'm sure, because Jane looked at me rather amusingly this morning, because I said good morning and Merry Christmas. And I say that, every now and then, just to people, just because. And every now and then someone will say, Ray, it's July 7th. Why are you saying Merry Christmas? And I'll say, because for me, Christmas is about always the rebirthing of the Christ consciousness. And every now and then I just want to bring that back to my mind, that here right now is an opportunity to recognize that star that I am, birthing itself in, through, and as. So, forgive me for saying, Merry Christmas, but it's just a reminder for me that I know that I see that which is divine in you, sees itself. Thank you. Everything is about God. Everything is about how we are recognizing it, identifying it, and expressing it. So if I ask you this, are thoughts things? Because we say it, thoughts are things. Are they powerful? Because if you say yes, thoughts are things, and yes, they are powerful, then you understand that the next thing that comes with it is, are you using that power effectively? And I specifically wore Spider-Man today because with great power comes great responsibility. And if we are going to acknowledge that thoughts are things and thoughts are powerful, then we have to take the accountability and the responsibility to steward them as such. So, what evidence in our lives do we have that our thoughts are creative? You don't have to answer, but think to yourself, what evidence do you have in your life that your thoughts are creative? It is estimated that we think approximately 60,000 thoughts per day, with 99% of them being the same as the thoughts we thought before.
Yes.
We're recycling the same thoughts. So if we're going to say, change your thinking, change your life, then that 60,000 per day have to be changed. But if I ask, Let's assume that number is accurate, just for the sake of conversation. You ever say something else? Just for the sake of conversation. How many of those 60,000 thoughts are thoughts that you really want to be thinking? How many of those 60,000 thoughts are thoughts obsessing about illness and dis-ease? How many of those thoughts are obsessing about lack and scarcity, war and rumors of war, what I don't have, probably never will have, and the struggle for, to get, to be, to have, to... How many of those 60,000 thoughts are thinking about exactly what we don't want? And if we're going to talk about them being powerful, then we have to start shifting those thoughts. We have to start minding our business. Minding our own business, which is the business of consciousness. Yeah, I don't want to do that. So, anybody know this guy? Nope. Oh, who said that? Yo, yes. Who is famous for saying?
I think therefore I am.
Yes.
But he didn't say it like that.
Who said it?
Can you pronounce that for us?
Cogito ergo sum, or sum, depending on who you ask.
Okay.
I think therefore I am.
I think, therefore I am. Yeah. But what? I think, therefore I am poor. I think, therefore I am sick. I think, therefore I am worried. I think, therefore I am afraid. I think, therefore I am scared of. I think, therefore I am angry. I think, therefore I am... Because we hear people say this all day, every day. I am so sick and tired of. I am. I think, therefore I am. But what follows the I am? You get to change this by changing your thinking, by changing how you are thinking, by changing what you are focusing on. Right here and right now. So yesterday, as part of my getting back into being more effective as a steward of my physical fitness, I decided to go for a walk yesterday in the new neighborhood. And Ray doesn't just do a quick little jaunt. Ray did a 6.21 mile walk. So right now, Ray's body is like, dude, you couldn't have just walked to the mailbox and back to the... We had to go to where the antelope roam?
Gotta get more.
But if I focus on the pain, then I feel more pain. But when I don't focus on the pain's still there. But when I don't focus on it, then I'm able to lift the leg and show you the Spider-Man tennis shoe, and the pain isn't there in that moment. Though right now it is there. How are we using the power of focus? In Japanese it's called kime, K-I-M-E, focus. And in martial arts they talk about you have to have this laser-like focus, like a magnifying glass takes the light and turns it into a laser. Do we have that kind of focus when it comes to our wealth and prosperity, abundance and opulence, not just of finances, but of health and well-being, of relationships and joy, of simply being alive? Do we have that kind of focus? Or are we like in the cartoon? Anybody see the cartoon Up? Remember the scene, for those who did see it, remember the scene where the dog has the speaking collar and dog, squirrel! Squirrel! So yes, it's squirrel. Like, are we so easily distracted by the glitz and the glamour or the gluck and the muck of life that we're not really tending to our own, minding our own business once again? Are we so easily distracted? If you're God, your spirit, your source, then the same power that crafted and created every species of rose, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Pluto, all the, each unique and different, blades of grass, types of apples, colors in the spectrum, notes that can be played at an infinite number of musical pieces, then that same power and presence is the exact same power and presence that we are. But if we're not using it, then we're no different than if Safi never touched her guitar again. She's not going to make music with a guitar that she never picks up. No one can cook with a recipe that they never... So the responsibility comes to us. When do we understand, I am that? Whatever, I am powerful, I am. I am amazing, I am. When do we get to affirming that on such a regular basis that it becomes, of course? Like, I don't even need to affirm this anymore because I know it is the truth of my being. It simply is. When do we get to that level of consciousness that we know how good, how amazing, how glorious, and how powerful we are? Because if we do a whole bunch of I don't know what just happened. I don't know. Un momento, por favor. Oh. Pay attention, Ray. Push the right buttons.
You pressed the wrong button.
Hey, there's no such thing as wrong, Doug.
But you muted it. I was told you muted it, sir.
It was reflection time.
Thank you, Robin. So when do we get to the point where we actually recognize in the martial arts, there's a point where you study and you study and you study. Anybody in here know Eugene Holden? So Eugene Holden, practitioner extraordinaire, used to be one of the key people for the World Ministry of Prayer for CSL, Religious Science. He and I had a conversation the other day. It was supposed to be a 30-minute conversation, but it ended up being just shy of an hour. And one of the things he said was when he was studying martial arts, when he finally got his first degree as a black belt, his instructor said, "Now it begins." One of my instructors said the exact same thing to me, different words, but the exact same thing. Now that you have this level of training, now it begins. Now what begins? Now your level of mastery of how you show up in the world, now that begins. How are we walking this walk? How are we showing up as? What are our mental practices each day to help re-ground us in this idea of, wait a minute, thoughts are things. My thought is powerful. Why am I giving this level of thought? Meaning, yes, there are things in the world that are right now heinous and horrendous and horrific, and yes. And for as long as we continue to think about them at the level of consciousness that created them, nothing changes about them. But if we think about the problem at a higher level, then the solution begins to reveal itself. If the doctor who created open heart surgery or heart transplant or blood transfusion or whatever only had in their mind, this is impossible. You want me to take a heart from one person and this is then no, we would never have. We would never have an artificial heart if we thought about the problem only from the level of the problem itself. We have to elevate the idea, which means engaging in our spiritual practices, mindfulness, meditation, conversation that elevates the conversation. You get what I'm saying? Having conversation that elevates the conversation changes the level of the conversation.
Yes.
But are we doing that? So we believe that the universal spirit, which is God, operates through a universal mind, which is the law of God, and that we are surrounded by this creative mind, which receives the direct impress of our thoughts and acts upon it. The law of mind receives our thoughts and acts accordingly. What thoughts are we putting into the law? Thoughts that we are thinking over and over. That's 60,000. How are we using those credits of energy? Core concept 3 that we talked about last week, creative nature. God thinks and the world comes into being. Likewise, all human accomplishments originate in thought. Our human thinking process is a reflection of the divine creative process in the microcosm. How are we using our mental powers? How are we using this thing called mind to bring into being a different level of? So Emmett Fox says, what you think upon grows. Whatever you allow to occupy your mind, you magnify in your life. Whether the subject of your thought be good or bad, the law works and the condition grows. Any subject you keep out of your mind tends to diminish in your life because what you do not use atrophies. The more you think of grievances, the more such trials you will continue to receive. The more you think of the good fortune you have, and the more good fortune will come to you. Got that, right? However, danger, Will Robinson, danger, Will Robinson. Any subject you keep out of your mind tends to diminish in your life because what you do not use atrophies. So if I don't think about racism, I won't experience it. It's easy to use such things like this and bypass and malpractice. I don't have to obsess about it, but the problem of homophobia, transphobia, racism, sexism, etc., if I want it to change, then I have to treat and move my feet accordingly. Which means I have to change how this subject is occupied in my mind. It doesn't mean don't think about it, because, yeah, you got a toothache? Don't think about it. Just pray. Sue, let's pray about my third molar in the back of my somewhere here in my jaw is hurting. Let's pray, and that's all, and that's all, and that's all. Yeah, okay. And when my dentist asked me, why didn't you come in 3 weeks ago before your jaw turned into the size of a football? Well, I was praying it away. Yeah, there's a point to pray, but remember, there's the second half of that, treat and Sue, pray for my whatever, and I'm going to the dentist. And pray that my dentist is enlightened enough, wise enough, intelligent enough to be able to tend to this in the most effective and pain-free way possible. Why not that prayer? Right? So it doesn't mean to ignore and go about your business as if it doesn't exist. But once again, it's easy to bypass. It means change the level of how you are multiplying, there I go again, Dr. Ron. Multiplying, subtracting, and dividing this thing called the problem. Ernest Holmes, in the book The Art of Life, which was previously published as This Thing Called Life, says a couple of things. You are using the law of life every time you think. Since you are fundamentally a mental being, you can think yourself into being unhappy and depressed. Or you can think yourself into being glad. Did it ever occur to you that you can also think yourself into being well, into being prosperous? That you can think yourself into success? Well, you can, if you believe in the law of life and use it rightly. Meaning being a good steward, an effective steward of it. But you must learn to use it affirmatively. You must become master of your own thinking. This is the only way you will realize freedom and joy. You are a thinking center of life, and the chief characteristic of the law of life is that it responds to your thought. Your slightest thought sets up a vibration in it. So remember we were talking about as you think in your heart, feeling and thought are married. When there is a thought that you are thinking and a strong emotional fire to it, then you are thinking in your heart. There are some thoughts we think and they just, monkey mind is like, and that we're not attached to it. It's just, ooh, that was a random thought, and we let it go. But there are some thoughts where it's like, hold on a second. I need to marinate on how much I really hate this person right now. They really did me wrong and did me, I'm not really ready to let go of that right now, so. Those thoughts that cause angst and pain and anger, etc. That's thinking in our heart. So one way to really get to knowing what we are thinking is get in tune with what you're feeling. Be really good at identifying when you're frustrated, angry, upset, in angst, agitated. And then find out what thought is connected to what's making me agitated. So if I'm in traffic, traffic's not agitating you. It's your thought about what traffic means that's agitating you. So what is it about that? Well, my thought about this is that I don't like waiting. Well, why is that? What's the thought that you have thinking about what you're waiting for? Why is it bad to wait? Sometimes waiting is a good thing, anticipation. But right now you don't. Yeah, what's up with that? Let's get really clear on what is. Go back and go back and go back and go back and go back. What is it about that? Because some of us don't like being in traffic because we don't like sitting still. I mean, if you really get to the nuts and bolts of it, some of us are annoyed by traffic because we don't sit still. And now we are being forced to be still. Be still and know that I am. So maybe that's an invitation in the midst of, why is she paying for this with coupons and coins? Be still and know that. Why am I stuck in traffic? What's with the rubberneck? Be still and know that. Be still and know that in this moment, that which God is, you are. And as you think, so you are creating more of. If you're thinking frustrating thoughts, you're going to...
What are you thinking?
If you think more frustrating thoughts, that's what happens when you got big thumbs. Leave me alone. But you're going to create more of the very thing. You know, what did he say about, you can think yourself into happiness or frustration or whatever. Every single one of us understands that there are 1-900 numbers that people call on a regular, that is a multi-trillion-dollar industry, for someone to talk a certain kind of way. And people pay for it. It's not happening. But in their mind, it is. Their imagination. So if you're willing to pay someone to talk sexy to you, so that your mind can envision it, so that you can swipe the credit card and get more of it, so then clearly we understand that thoughts are powerful things. But we Tupperware them, we separate them like, well, that applies to that, but it doesn't apply to my happiness. It doesn't apply to my well-being. It doesn't apply to peace on earth, goodwill to all human beings. It doesn't apply to that. We separate those ideas. There is one mind. And check this out. So I know Sue mentioned that Safi in the meditation, and correct me if I misquote, mentioned this idea of sending out love, sending out joy, sending out this vibration of, so that we are enveloping the world in this. Yes. And keep in mind, there is only one life, and that life is God's life, and that life is everywhere present right now. So if it's everywhere present, then the moment Safi in this moment is being love, then in every corner of, everywhere in creation, that energy of God as love is present. Meaning, there's no need to send it. I'm not saying don't send it. I'm saying understand that there is also a level of consciousness where we simply are able to be it in the Middle East while we're here. We're able to be it in the White House while we're here. We're able to be it in the detention camps where the kids and the families are separated while we are here. We are able to be that presence right here and right now. How many of you have heard of the Baltimore ceasefire? When they are doing it, do you elevate in your consciousness this idea of knowing where you are in case you're not present with? I'm elevating my awareness and I'm surrounding them in love, in light, knowing that right where they are, God is. And that because where God is, love, joy, peace must be present, then every person that sees them and every person they see, they're seeing the face of God. Every car that drives by them is now infected and contagious with the love and the peace that they are. Are we willing and able to do that? Or do we simply click a like and a heart on Facebook when they say they're doing it, and we go about our business, but we're not changing anything in our consciousness? What in the... Life is a mirror and will reflect back to the thinker what he thinks, what they think into it. Choose to avoid thoughts that weaken you, and you will know true wisdom. Now, this idea of choose to avoid thoughts that weaken you, just be aware that thoughts, it has been studied that there is actually a mind-body connection, that when we are thinking disempowering things, the immune system weakens. So if I am thinking how much I don't like Safi, it's a lie right now. If I am thinking of how much I don't like her, then my immune system is compromised. She's still singing, doing what she does. My immune system. The flu is now like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. Hey, the barriers are down. He's weak right now. Let's go. Boom. And then I'm wondering how my body found the flu. Or cold. Could it be simply because my immune system was lowered or compromised because I'm thinking of how much I do not like the current administration in the White House? Like, is that what's... Because I get into a whole bunch of conversations with a whole bunch of people, and I say, have you ever thought that, maybe this experience of a cold that you've had for 6 months could be because you're diverting your energy to resources that you don't want to divert your resources to? And they're like, oh, never thought about that. So we pray, we meditate, we do a couple of sessions, and then the next thing you know, the cold is gone. I'm like, okay, so what shifted for you? I'm like, well, I started focusing on, so choose to think thoughts that strengthen you. And that's what will result. What kind of thoughts bring you joy? What kind of thoughts make you feel good? So that even in the midst of, this is why I love the story of Viktor Frankl, because even in the midst of being in Hitler's Germany in a concentration camp, the man was able to find a reason to live and have joy. So it is possible to be in the midst of the storm and anchor to peace. Willing to do the work. So Emma Curtis Hopkins is really, 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 really good for, some absolute. There is no sin, sickness, or death in my life. Like that kind of, So here she says, the Spirit knows nothing of imperfection. Pause. Spirit is all there is. That means Spirit is showing up in you, as you, through you, right here and right now. And yet, what it is, knows nothing of imperfection. That means there is a part of you that doesn't recognize or understand this concept of imperfect? Who? What? The Spirit shines through all your being with its clear, holy light. From first to last in your real life, no error has fastened upon you. No error has fastened upon you. Fastened, made itself attached to, is stuck to, is siphoning energy from. It has not fastened itself to you. Make a mistake, move on. 2 + 2 = 9. Erase it and move on. But if you sit there, 2 + 2 = 9, and your math teacher says, what are you doing? Is that, I'm so stupid. I never do anything right. I never remember names. I'm not good with my bank account. I'm so heavy. I'm so this. I'm so that. My mom said and my dad said and everybody said. And on top of that, check this out. I'm black and I'm gay. Oh, man. What in the world? No error has fastened itself upon you. Therefore, there is no, take a breath. Therefore, there is no disease or imperfection in you. And yet we experience it. We experience it. And she's not talking about you don't experience it. It's not within you. It's not the truest essence of what you are. But if you act like it is, move like it is, have your beingness like it is, then you're making it a reality for you. You're making it as if it is a capital T truth of who and what you are. Our experiences aren't who and what we are. If I fall down every time it snows and I go outside and I slip and fall, does that mean from this point on, Safi can say, or Reverend Minister Mo can say, oh, you're a faller? I'm a what? Well, you fall all the time, therefore, you must be a faller. We don't do that. Or do we? Because there are times when we create these labels for ourselves and we let them stick. I'm not a good mother, I'm not a good father. I'm not a good this, I'm not a good that. Oh, I'm a horrible cook. Whether you are or not, whether you would be on the show with Ann Burrell for worst home kitchen cook, whatever thing, beside the point. Why call yourself something that is not what you want to be? She goes on to say, you are free from all thoughts of disease. God is your life. You cannot be threatened with death or any part of your life, nor fear death, nor yield to death of any part of your life forever. And what she's saying basically is, you can't die. The you that you are, we believe in the individual soul forever and ever expanding. We don't believe, in this teaching, we don't believe in death as the finality of life. Because then that implies that God can die. So life changes form. Remember the phrase, what the caterpillar calls death, the butterfly calls life. But if we focus on how afraid we are of this thing called death, the boogeyman of, then we're going to act in a very timid way. We are not going to risk it all. We are not going to go all out. And yet we could. Thoughts are things. Therefore, my thoughts are empowering and life-affirming. And I live an empowered and life-affirming experience of life. If you feel so motivated to affirm this or declare this with me, then let us begin. Thoughts are things. Therefore, my thoughts are empowering and life-affirming, and I live an empowered and life-affirming experience of life. Now, your homework assignment, what does that look like in your life? If you are going to say, I live, doesn't say I think I live. I live an empowered and life-affirming experience of life, then what do you now need to shift in your life experience so that you are living an empowered life? So that you are living in a way that demonstrates life-affirming experiences of life. If we don't change anything, then we already know it's attributed to Einstein. We already know the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, 60,000 thoughts of the same thing over and over and over and over and over again.
And expecting different results.
And somehow expecting that things are going to be different.
Under the same conditions.
It's time to change. It's time to treat and move our feet so that we can live this empowered and life-affirming experience of life. Let's pray. Simply anchoring in this moment and allowing ourselves to breathe. Surrendering fully to the numinous experience of respiration, recognizing that God is breathing itself as us. And so from this place of surrendering to the breath, simply allowing it to be. I speak what I know. I know that there is that which is beyond explanation, that which is beyond definition, that which goes by many names: God, Spirit, love, the thing itself, life. And that which it is incarnating itself right here and right now, in, through, and as all that I am. And because it is all there is, I know that this statement of truth about myself is true for everyone in this room. Life incarnating itself. Love demonstrating itself as flesh and blood. The one mind thinking itself in each individual incarnation. There is only God. And so right now, I anchor into what that looks like in my life to recognize and acknowledge that all that God is, I am. And that as I live and move and have my beingness, as this beloved community lives, moves, and has its beingness as the divine in expression, lives are transformed and the world is reformed. That a world that works for all is not simply an idea, but that right here and right now, through these words, through these hands, through this one mind, this is truth. That this is the empowered and life-affirmed experience that we are living on planet Earth. A world that works for all. Not simply all people, but all, meaning animals, trees, plants, all that God is enveloped in these words of a world that works for all. Knowing that this idea, this equation wouldn't even be possible to speak if the solution were not already in the mind of God. So I anchor my mind to that mind, the one mind, God's mind. And I know that that which exists in the mind of God is already fully formed. And so I allow that to download into this incarnated experience that I call my life, that I call this beloved community, knowing that what is ours to do, we are doing. What is mine to do, I am doing. Anchoring this in law with gratitude and thanksgiving, because I know it is done, I know it is so. Together, I and the members of this community declare this, knowing that the universe is right now conspiring for its own good in, through, and as every part of our beings. We declare this awareness by saying, and so it is. Amen.